Love your neighbour as yourself, arguably the greatest commandment given to us by Jesus, and possibly the hardest to keep. So is it especially shocking when the Church of England has to acknowledge there's still racism in its midst? That's something they first acknowledged in 1987. Well, this week the House of Bishops announced it's working on a plan to double the number of minority ethnic clergy in senior positions over the next decade. Now, there are currently fewer than 5. Is the Church of England institutionally racist? Lay member of the Synod, Alison Ruoff, is there a big problem here?
No.
Is that the debate over about it?
Yeah,
or do we need to carry on our discussions? There isn't a problem.
No, I don't think there is a problem. I think it's blown out of all proportion. I actually think that every church, no, I correct that, not every church is as welcoming perhaps as they should be, but most churches are. And people...
but yours is the state church. It's the established church.
Well, what's that got to do with it?
Is it, well, I'll tell you, because is it properly reflecting modern society, given that there was a survey out this week, by about 2050, 1/3 of this country are not going to be white. So you have to do something about it, you have to move with the times, otherwise the Church of England will surely become irrelevant.
The Church of England won't become irrelevant as far as I can see. It might divide at some point over various issues, but it's not irrelevant. It's really important. It's as at the moment, because it's the established church, therefore there's the opportunity for the Christian message to go to every house in every parish. Whether it does or not is another matter. But I do think that we work ourselves up into a frenzy about this institutional racism. If you go to a church in a village, say in the depths of Devon or Norfolk, you might not see any people of an ethnic minority because simply they don't live there. If you go to a church in central London, you'll probably see a lot of people of all sorts of ethnic minorities all worshipping together and all getting on very well.
We could walk out the door here at Goldsmiths.
Indeed.
Here, there'd be 5 within walking distance, within a stone's throw almost, 5 Pentecostal churches that are full to the brim on a Sunday morning.
And that's wonderful.
Sorry?
That's wonderful. But people like to be with their own, and I think we have to remember that. They do. You know, well, for example, if you all come from France, if you've got lots of French neighbours, will you tend to go and be with your French neighbours?
I thought the point of the church was that everyone was welcome.
But it is true. Well, why do people, if you're in central London, in Oxford Circus, say, you hear everybody speaking their own language in their groups. They don't all suddenly start speaking English, unless they have to.
Cole?
I think we need to make a very strong demarcation here between the experience in churches that Alison is talking about, wherever they may be, whatever parish they may be, they're all very different, and the experience of the church, the institution of the church. Alison will know full well that in 1985, when Faith in the City report came out, one of the things that was hidden away in that, but was still a very clear message to the Church of England was, there is an ongoing massive incoming of people from the Caribbean, from Africa and Asia, and those people are Christians and they're believers, and unless you are welcoming and open to them, you will not actually engage with them. That's what has happened. The Church of England has not engaged with them. The Pentecostal Church is growing enormously in London, not just because people want to flock together, as you put it, Alison, but because in many cases, when they came, they were not welcome in their local church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that in my own experiences, for instance, my parents, like my mother, they were not welcomed in Anglican churches, so they had to splinter off and create their own churches.
Can I ask you, what did that not welcomed in Anglican churches mean? How did it manifest itself?
Well, I even remember as a kid when we used to go to church, it was just staid and dry and dead and boring when we used to go to the ordinary church. It was just, the preacher says something, people like the performing seals, they'll clap every now. There was no interaction. Anthropology,
no joy.
We call it. There was no joy, there was no spirit. You couldn't really be emotive. My mother always says that if you go to church and the preacher doesn't move you with the word, he's not doing his job.
Although, to be fair, there is joy and pleasure in the Anglican church all over the place.
Of course there is.
You just got the wrong one.
Maybe, Alison...
Or maybe as a child I was experienced continuously.
There is that perception, it's a
wrong
bit staid. Maybe you should go to one of these services, Alison, let your hair down, feel...
I haven't got long enough hair.
You could let it down, whatever you got. Feel the spirit, feel that way.
It's not a question of style, Nicky.
John
I think the point is, Alison says people like to be with their own. And, you see that in all sorts of ways. You have to say, is that Christianity? Because the Christian faith has a very powerful vision of people of every nation and tribe and language gathering together in worship. And the failure of the Church of England is that's not exhibited with sufficient enthusiasm, energy, vigour, because plans aren't made to make it that way. You know, it's institutional racism.
So there needs to be a conscious effort. Owen, you want to come in, and we'll hear from the audience too. Then Alison in a minute.
Sorry.
Alison, your point's just not true. I mean, we live in this hugely diverse city, for example, London. In Britain, we have some of the highest levels of mixed-race relationships on the face of the earth. People in this city in particular, and elsewhere, they live together, they work together, they even sleep together in some cases. They're setting up families, they're living together. And I have to say, if the church is going to die, it will be because of people like you. Because 1 in 7 people now only go to a religious service. It's not representative.
Let me ask you a question. Do you go to church?
No, I don't go to church.
Right, so how do you know? Come on.
Exactly.
How do you know?
I'll turn that on its head. Why are so few people of my generation going to churches? And I would suggest it's because it's seen as completely out of date to say.
Alison Ruoff.
My daughter...
Alison Ruoff and Owen Jones. It's a dream ticket, ladies and gentlemen. Alison Ruoff.
My daughter goes to a church that's not an Anglican church. She goes to Hillsong from Australia. And on Easter Sunday, they had 10,000 young people going to church. On Good Friday, they had 450 young people baptised. Now, you can't tell me Christianity's dead in this country.
I didn't say it was dead. I said, people like you will ensure that it won't be relevant.
I'm sorry, but I believe that young people are most welcome in the Church of England and in any church. It doesn't have to be the Church of England. I
want to establish something.
I just want to know that everybody who goes to church can hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Yes. That's what I care about.
In whatever way they hear it. 1 second. John Root.
What's best for them?
Let's get back to it. Is the Church of England institutionally racist?
Yeah, because I think institutional racism isn't just being unkind, nasty to people. You know, we often have quite a simplified view of what racism is.
It's more subtle.
It's much more subtle, yeah. And it's the way the institution chooses to operate. And institutions tend to operate in the way that those who lead are comfortable with. And that's different from the way that ordinary people, most ordinary white people, but certainly ordinary black people as well feel. And therefore there's that sort of exclusion which in a sense Les was indicating when he said it's boring and so on. Because that's not just black people who think that, white people think that as well. Yeah. You know, so it needs to be an intentional desire to change the way we operate, that it does actually facilitate and develop the gifts that black people bring.
How do we get a situation facilitated, Andrew, in just 1 second, whereby there are more, not just Johnson Tamu and a few others, but there are more black leaders in the Church of England? How do we get there, Les?
Well, for me, first of all, you know, we have to have the right conversation. You know, every historical cause has a contemporary consequence. We know that the Church of England, the Anglican Church, whatever, all of them were involved in African chattel enslavement. All of them. I think only the Quakers weren't involved in that.
It's a long time ago, though.
It doesn't matter if it's a long time ago, because how you have to think about it is, think about it in this way. If you're a black person and you're in this congregation and it's more or less an all-white congregation, you're in there. Or it could be an all-black congregation with a white vicar, priest or whatever. And you cannot see yourself in that position because, one, continuously reinforced through the images, God is white, Jesus is white. You can never aspire to be God. You can never aspire to be Jesus. You can walk in Jesus' footsteps, but can you be like him? These things cause dissonance because you don't see yourself represented in that picture. Then would you be surprised that those people are cowed and don't put themselves forward for these higher positions? Because if they're getting treated like that as members of the congregation, what is that going to be like if they get to those higher echelons?
And Alison, I know you want to come back. And audience in a second, and Andrew too. Yeah.
The thing is, Les, the majority of Anglicans in the world are black.
That's right.
The majority are in Africa, actually. And the Church of England needs to learn from that and engage with that, and has a problem with engaging that, particularly over the issue of same-sex marriage at the moment. But I think we have to be really clear. I go to church, Alison. I go to lots of churches, actually. And I see lots of churches where there are people of mixed race and people of different colours and people of different backgrounds. And they're fantastic. But the issue here is institutional racism, and that is not reflected in the House of Bishops or the leadership of the Church, and that is an anomaly and a disgrace.
Reverend Andrew Symes.
Yes, I mean, it's a very serious charge if people are saying there's institutional racism, because as has been mentioned already, part of the Christian gospel is that it's for everybody, that it's not for, it's available for everyone, of whatever culture. And I think perhaps we need to ask, is there something in the culture of the Church of England, particularly the leadership of the Church of England, which, it's not that people are deliberately excluding other people, it's just there's something in the culture which is not attractive. And I think what's been said is that...
it could be a self-perpetuating elite.
Well, it could be, exactly. And I think that's true with a lot of organisations, not just the church. And so I think this process of asking the question...
all organisations would strive to be immune from that.
Yeah, but I think, as has already been mentioned, there are churches which are packed with people of all sorts of different races. And the question perhaps is to ask them, especially... churches, black majority churches, let's say, where people are praising the Lord, they are confident in themselves, confident in the gospel, in their mission to their particular community. Ask them, what is it about the Church of England that doesn't attract you, which is what Les was saying. It may be to do with stars worship.
But
30 years too late, because we had...
No, you see, to me, it's not too late, because we were having a discussion upstairs, and one of the things we said was, in 2007, great inroads were made, maybe for the wrong reason, when it was a so-called 200 years since the abolition of the slave trade. But I know I was invited into more churches and mosques during that year than I ever have been in my life to have these kind of conversations. At the time, I just published a book called Whiteness Made Simple. And in that book, I spoke about being raised as a Judeo-Christian child and how that affected and impacted me when I started to look at, on one hand, we're encouraged to praise the Lord, everybody is welcome in the house of the Lord, but the Lord didn't look like us. And if you speak to black people, on his point, if you speak to black people and you say to a lot of them, and if they're honest, then you say to them, how do you feel about a white Jesus? How would you feel about replacing it with a black Jesus? They will invariably say, God doesn't have no color. Jesus doesn't have a color.
Jesus wasn't white.
Rather than to confront the history.
In Palestine.
No, you're missing my point. The point is that is the image, the Warner Salmon images that have been ingrained in everyone's consciousness.
That's the image of this particular culture. Hands up on that point. Hands up on that. Alison, I will be with you. Two gentlemen there at the back in the cream jacket. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I'm an atheist, and I'm also from an organisation called the London Black Atheists, and the answer is simple. When you look at the character of religion in contemporary society today, you see that more often than not, contained within today's religion is misogyny, sexism, racism. When you look at all the Quran...
Do you think that, talking about the Church of England specifically, do you feel from your experience and what people have told you, from what you've heard, that those things are part of attitudes within the Church of England?
Yes, it is. I mean, they were responsible for partaking in the slavery. It's very...
Come down, and it's further along. Yeah, what's your point?
Yeah, I'm also from London Black Atheists.
They're all sitting together. That's,
yes,
you see, you're right, Alison. People like to stick together. Go on.
All religions are basically institutionally racist, because
they're not.
the moment you have a religion, you have an in-group and an out-group, and therefore you have your chosen people or whatever it is. They're institutionally racist.
Right, got you. Are you from? Are you from the Black Atheists?
I'm not.
Oh, right.
I'm not. I was actually baptized in the Church of England.
Right. Okay. Right.
But then later on, I actually changed my mind not to actually be with the Church of England. There are key things.
Where do you worship now? May I?
Now I actually worship with the Catholic Church.
Right.
Which, again, I know they have quite a lot of issues also going with them. But I would say that Church of England is actually kind of like disconnect itself from the African fellowship. So most of the issue that the Africans have in the church are always not listened to.
Well, like
and the Africans...
Equal marriage and so forth? And
yes.
Yeah, okay, right.
They
okay.
do have some strong views in there, but the thing is, they feel that the church is unwilling to listen to any of their views.
Alison Ruoff, that's interesting, this paradox about the massive power of the Anglican Church and popularity in Africa. But on the point about, what Les has raised about the feeling of being excluded and the historical reasons of slave trade, what's your response to that?
Well, I wasn't around in the middle of the slave trade. I have to
nor
say.
was I. Well, at least I hope I weren't.
But we've moved a long way since perhaps the time when your parents came to this country, and I think in the 60s we didn't do it all well at welcoming people particularly from the Caribbean nations, and I apologise for that. But we have learned a lot, and I go to a church which is in a white middle-class area. And our congregation is composed of all sorts of people and all sorts of colours, Asians, black people, all sorts, and we get on really well. Having said that, I think we've only got one person of an ethnic minority on the PCC.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, we've had Asian people on the PCC, but they won't stand, or they don't want to stand.
Why not?
Well, they don't want the responsibility, they want to do other things, and so on.
You see,
it's not always easy to get people to do these particular jobs. I would love more people to come and
Why don't they want the responsibility?
I have no idea, but
this is the
white
kind of
people
conversation
are
I'm saying,
just the same.
But this is the kind of conversation I'm saying that perhaps you should have.
We do have it. We try and persuade people.
Because what I'm saying is, if you can
come and join us,
but if you can kind of go to the default that they don't want to accept the responsibility, that's like when they used to say, oh, black youth in England don't want to work because they used to smoke weed all the time or they're getting high and all this kind of crazy stuff. At the end of the day, what you need is a clear conversation.
We do have conversations.
I run courses with a group called Black History Studies where we interrogate these things, and every time I run this course, I'll have Christians in there, black, maybe white, and they will say, we do not have this quality of debate or discussion. So people just dismiss the fact that there isn't representation because people don't want to be responsible.
Now, there was a famous sociologist who said that my position is my possession.
Richard Sennett,
exactly. That's the guy. Yeah, my position is my possession. Is that the problem? Is the problem, John Root, in the pews, or is it in the hierarchy, the purple shirts?
Yeah, it's in the nation, in a sense, because, I think we terrify the phrase institutional racism, or the phrase racism. But it's endemic, because it's a generalised attitude amongst white people of superiority, of not expecting much from black people.
Oh,
and if you actually listen closely to black people in the Church of England, there's this sense of not being affirmed, of not being welcomed, not in a very overt way at all. But in quite a subtle way.
Carry on, John. I want to come to the lady there in a second, if you don't mind.
So people I know who are trained for ministry, for example, they wouldn't say people are racist in the sense that you're told to go away or you're not welcome. But there's a lack of interest, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of readiness to learn, which actually inhibits people. So that it's in the pews. It's ordinary white people actually not having that zest to learn, to develop, to say, what do these people bring to the table?
Lady there. You're married to a clergyman, aren't you?
Yes, I
Which
am.
clergyman are you married to?
To John Rhodes.
To him?
Yes.
So what's your... I know we had a conversation earlier and you said, I'm not sure if I want to speak.
Yes.
I'm glad you do want to speak. What's your experience been? Have you felt any sort of hostility over the years?
Yes, I will say I did feel hostility, and I would not say that it came from everyone, but it did. It does exist, and actually, in order to foster, you actually need to get to the other person's side. Like when Alison said that, I don't know why they don't want to take responsibility, that just shows that you don't really understand why they have, why did you get that impression? I think that needs to be. So I think it's very important that we need to listen and actually to affirm. And in order to affirm, you need to recognize the gifts that we, as an ethnic minority, I have gifts, we all have gifts. And we want to use it.
Beautiful.
It is a problem in society as a whole, though, Nick. I mean, look at this panel. We're in London, and all of us, apart from one, are white. Look at the lack of black MPs. Look at the lack of black journalists.
Well,
this is a problem all of us have to deal with, but it's a very small minority, so it's a central problem.
There are only two archbishops, and one is white and one is black.
No, but if you look at the senior clergy,
after that, there's none.
No,
and John Sentamo, was raised overseas. Hang on. So we've not actually developed black British ministers, clergy, senior
But
leaders.
look at the numbers. The number of black people compared with white people in terms of the whole of the nation. There aren't that many in percentage.
No, it's not about numbers, is it? It's about institutional racism. And for me, a telling point in what you said was, I don't know why they don't want to get involved. One thing, as has been said, is to go and talk to people.
Of course we talk to people.
But the other thing is that we need to all be open, whether it's in a sexist context, a racist context, whatever context we're talking about it in. We need to be prepared to change and move our institutions to change the way that they operate. So it's not about saying, why don't you want to take a role in my institution as it is? It's about saying, what is it about this institution that we all need to change?
This is a church. And this is a church. This is a church whereby everybody is welcome. Doesn't matter who they are, what colour or anything. They're welcome.
A last word, Andrew.
Yeah, I think there is a problem generally in society, as was mentioned here, also about participation in volunteerism.
That's right.
I think that's probably a case in many institutions. And so I think there is a challenge to the church in terms of its welcome. There's a constant challenge for that. There's a constant challenge in terms of persuading people of all different types. I mean, you could talk about white working class men or any other group in order to encourage people who perhaps don't feel that, as you say, they look at the thing and they say that that's not me. There is a challenge for that, encouraging participation, and that's true for the church, but it's true for all other voluntary organisations.
Thank you all so much indeed. Thank you for that. And thoughts will come in, and you can join in all this morning's debates. Log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions and follow the link to the online discussion.